Salofalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up, candidates confirmed for Tonga's upcoming election. Also, Bougainville swears in its MPs, and
it's all informed by our elders, informed by our youth, informed by the women in society.
Climate experts in New Zealand discuss resilience measures. But first, an update from Nauru, where Parliament has re-elected David Ariang as the country's president. The nation went to the polls on Saturday to elect 19 representatives to Parliament. The final results were confirmed Monday by the country's Electoral Commission, and on Tuesday, the country's 25th Parliament sat for the first time, with MPs voting David Ariang in for a second term as president. Mr. Ariang is 55 years old and was first elected president in 2023 after his predecessor was ousted in a vote of no confidence. He's a former Nauru Justice Minister. Tongans are gearing up for next month's general election. Polling day is set down for November 20th. 2 sets of voting take place, one for the nobles and one for the general population. I spoke with our RNZ Pacific correspondent in Tonga, Kalafi Moala. Malolele Kalafi, first off, tell me about the key players or the key candidates vying to be elected. I see that former Tonga Prime Minister Huakaveme Liku Siasi Sovaleni has registered. I mean, it's interesting given he resigned last year before the vote of no confidence even took place.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about his constituency, there's only one other candidate standing against him, which shows that many people who could have been candidates, they feel that he's still going to win the constituency. There are about 3 other constituencies where there are only 2 candidates that are running. Whereas there are others like Tongatapu number 7, Tongatapu number 10. There's at least 7 candidates in each. The other factor too that's really interesting is there are quite a number of overseas people, Tongans, who have come to Tonga to run for office.
Yeah, speaking of overseas Tongans, I know that there are calls to open voting registrations for Tongans living overseas. What are you hearing on the ground? Is there a keen interest to take a look at this?
Yeah, there's a keen interest, but they don't have any laws yet that allows overseas Tongans to vote from overseas, from where they are. They have to come to Tonga and be registered in Tonga to be able to vote. What they're calling for is to allow it in the future elections so that the people in San Francisco or the Sydney or the Auckland allow Tongans there to come in and be registered there to vote. That will be a major step in the future.
What are the arguments against it?
There are people that are saying, hey, you left Tonga. You don't live in Tonga. You don't know our issues. You don't know our situation here. You don't know what's priority to us. I think there are probably more people that are opposed to that happening. Because you know that there are more Tongans living outside of Tonga than in Tonga. And so I guess the fear is that elections locally would then be controlled from outside of Tonga.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at 108,000 people in Tonga and about 150,000 people outside of Tonga.
Just coming back to the candidates, I also see 6 women have been confirmed as contesting for the election. How does this compare to previous elections?
Previous elections, they've had almost similar numbers. I think it's disappointing. There should be more women contesting. And there has been a lot of talk over the past 2-3 years about it. But for somehow, I think these women that want to run as candidates, they still don't feel confident that in the political sphere that women are really given their place.
And what are the big issues people in Tonga are thinking about as campaigning gets underway?
Well, the key thing in campaigning, the candidates, they're all campaigning on the theme of good governance. We've had 15 years of reform, and people are coming back. We're now at another crossroads where we're saying, well, in the last 15 years, have that reform really worked for Tonga? Has that worked for us? Is our pathway to democracy as clear as we thought? Or what do we need to do? And that's where I think a lot of people are at the crossroads. They want to get into parliament because they feel that on the basis of good governance, that's where we need people who know how to govern.
Just to wrap up our talanoa, Kalafi, as you would have heard, veteran Tongan journalist Bessie Fonua has died. How would you describe his legacy in Pacific media?
He's a great, great loss to the nation. Definitely Bessie and his wife Mary, Matangi Tonga, of course, have always been a combined leadership effort between Bessie and his wife Mary. But the legacy of Bessie is this. One, there has been over the years a sense of they're reliable. You can trust Matangi Tonga News. Secondly, there is this tremendous consistency. That's a tremendous legacy for a media outfit that they have been there for a long time.
That was RNZ Pacific Tonga correspondent Kalafi Moala. To have a look at what's happening in the Pacific this week, I'm joined by our morning bulletin editor, Christina Persico. Kia ora, Christina.
Kia ora, Susanna.
Now I see we officially have a new parliament in Bougainville.
Yes, so the 45 members of the House of Representatives have been sworn in this autonomous region of Papua New Guinea. The incumbent president, Ismail Toruama, is back in. In his speech, he said he wants law and order to be strengthened under his administration.
Develop plan for strengthening law and order, focusing on correctional service, especially Bekut and Kuweria. Many of these priorities are not new.
Mr. Toruama has also made it clear he will continue pushing for independence from Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, it's been 6 years since the referendum on independence, so it'll be interesting to see where that progresses with Toruama back as president. Okay, so looking at Vanuatu now, there's been some earthquake damage there.
Yeah, an earthquake near Vanuatu's Pentecost Island last week has damaged a classroom at Atavtabanga Primary and Secondary School. This was not a massive shake. The US Geological Survey recorded it as a magnitude 5.7. One of the teachers at the school, Charles Bowler, spoke to the Vanuatu Daily Post. He said the Year 5 classroom suffered structural damage with large cracks appearing on the walls, and this isn't the first time it's been damaged. He says Cyclone Lola damaged the roof last year, and they'd been planning to rebuild.
Yeah, just while we're on the topic of Cyclone Lola and Vanuatu, I know there's been efforts from NGOs on the ground there, specifically Save the Children, helping local communities strengthen their resilience plans when it comes to natural disasters. I mean, it wasn't that long ago they were struck by 3 cyclones and an earthquake last year in December.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, back here in Aotearoa, New Zealand's just had local body voting, and it has its first Pasifika mayor.
That's right. The new mayor of Lower Hutt, near the capital Wellington, is Fa'ono Ken Laban. He will be known to many as a long-serving regional councillor, a former police officer, and of course as a sports commentator and rugby league personality. Now, his parents migrated to Aotearoa in the 1950s, and the family are well known around Wainuiamata. Fa'ono's sister is, of course, Lua Manuvau Dame Winnie Laban, the first female Pacific MP in New Zealand. Fa'ono told RNZ on Monday that it was only a matter of time for a descendant of Pacifica migrations to be elected into such leadership positions.
From a family perspective and a community perspective, it's a very moving time for all of us that are touched by that. And obviously from a New Zealand perspective, we live in an area where there's a lot of intense debate around diversity. So it's a nod for diversity, inclusion and equity as well.
Now, just to note that these local election results do remain provisional until the final count, including special votes, is confirmed on Friday.
Malo lava to Fa'ono. We actually had him on Pacific Waves earlier in the year, explaining why he wanted to become mayor, and I'm sure we'll have him on the show again sometime soon. Okay, Christina, what else has been in news bulletins this week?
So here in New Zealand, the Ministry of Health has announced another 2 measles cases in Northland. These measles cases have been quite a concern over the last couple of weeks, and people are being urged to get vaccinated if they haven't had 2 doses of measles-containing vaccine. But these latest cases were close contacts of earlier cases and so have been in isolation from the community. In wider world news, the release of hostages in the Gaza conflict has been met with celebration and relief. A ceasefire document for Gaza has been signed by the US and other mediators, Egypt, Qatar and Turkey.
And what's happening in sports, Christina?
My favourite part. We've had the All Blacks team named for the end-of-year tour. First match of that is against Ireland in Chicago on November the 2nd. Samoa is trying to qualify for the 2020 Cricket World Cup. Samoa's campaign has got quite a bit of attention given they have New Zealand legend Ross Taylor in their ranks. They are in action again on Wednesday our time, just before midnight. We've also had the announcement of the name of the Papua New Guinea NRL team, which will join the comp in 2028. They'll be known as the Chiefs. And, of course, the Pacific Championships start this weekend in Port Moresby on Saturday and in Auckland on Sunday.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to the Pacific Championships this
Me too.
weekend. I've been talking about it all the time last week. But anyway, whawhitai Christina, that was Christina Persico, our morning bulletin editor with our Pacific News Wrap. Pacific leaders believe climate experts are missing an opportunity to incorporate Indigenous knowledge into climate adaptation. The message comes as hundreds of scientists, leaders and climate experts from around the world gather at the Adaptation Futures Conference in Christchurch. Caleb Fotheringham reports.
The effects of climate change are already being felt in Tuvalu. At the conference's opening session, its Environment Minister, Mania Talia, explained how sea level rise is damaging agricultural land and fresh groundwater is becoming saline.
The figures are alarming. This is not just for Tuvalu, and this is not a Tuvaluan problem. It is not even a small island developing state's problem. It is a global economic bomb.
Incorporating Indigenous knowledge into climate adaptation is a major focus of the event. Mr. Talia feels the issue is generally presented in a Western lens.
We need to decolonize our mind, decolonize our soul, in order for us to integrate community-based adaptation measures.
The highest elevation in Tuvalu is only 4.5 metres. To combat rising seas, the government has started reclaiming land, one of the flagship adaptation projects for the island nation. Mr. Talia says a decolonised approach gives communities ownership of the work being done.
It's all informed by our elders, informed by our youth, informed by the women in society. We cannot come with the idea that, this is how your adaptation measure should look like.
The Director General of the Pacific Regional Environment Programme, Sefania Nawadra, wants researchers to listen to the concerns of the communities they serve.
It is not only about economic losses, although that's important, but also about the loss of biodiversity, loss of culture, loss of identity, loss of our sense of place, and in some cases, our very existence.
The president of Pacific Island Students Fighting for Climate Change, Cynthia Honui, adds that those on the front line of the adverse effects of climate change are often Indigenous people, which is almost always the case in the Pacific.
Who knows the place better than the ones that have lived there? So imagine that experience informs the solution. That's the best way.
Yusef Nassif is the head of adaptation at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He says it's not always clear how national adaptation plans include input from Indigenous people, and that knowledge on the issue doesn't always reach the people who need it most.
So we create knowledge, we put them in peer-reviewed publications, but are the people who are actually needing it on the front lines of climate change impacts really receiving that knowledge?
Pacific climate activists are coming off a high after a top UN court found failing to protect people from the adverse effects of climate change could violate international law. Cynthia Honui was one of the students who worked to get the advisory opinion in July from the International Court of Justice, but she told the crowd it means nothing if not acted upon.
We must continue the same energy, momentum, and drive into the implementation of the ruling. As one of our mentors rightly said, and I quote, "The law has finally caught up to the science. What we now need is policy to catch up to the law."
Adding that the advisory opinion provides clarity that wasn't there before.
The law now is on our side, so the consequence of that is that we have more weight to influence demand.
Ms. Honui expects the advisory opinion to be used as a negotiating tool by Pacific leaders at this year's COP30 in Brazil next month.
That was RNZ Pacific journalist Caleb Fotheringham. That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā, sui fua.